I never heard of Cackalacklycon. I'm imagining it's a security conference though.
What made you guess that?
Kakalaki doesn't sound like it has absolutely anything to do with security. So
Yeah, it's a North Carolina reference.
So Brian, when you're on the street and you see somebody, you're like, "Hey, kakalaki to you," and they're like, "Kakalaki to you, fine sir."
Exactly.
So try it out. Sometimes you
Yeah.
meet Carolina, anybody from the Carolinas, just out in the world, it'll work. So
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'll give that a shot.
Yo, JP, Brian, and Mark on the scene at Impart Security. We keep your APIs clean. Guarding real time, our tech is the top selection. For your apps, we provide that robust protection. Cutting edge safety, no need to fear. Impart's in the house, your data secure here.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Real AppSec Talk on LLMs in application security with Impart Security, Dry Run Security, and Compass. I am your host and moderator for today, Darwin Salazar, founder of the Cybersecurity Pulse and product manager at Monad. Today, I am joined by the Dean of Detection, Staff Detection Engineer and Response at Compass, Phillip Maddux. He is also the founder at Deception Logic and former AppSec advisor at Signal Sciences. Phillip will be giving us the practitioner perspective today. I am also joined by the man, the myth, the legend, James Wickett, co-founder and CEO at Dry Run Security, former head of security research at Verica and Signal Sciences. Little known fact about James is that he was the first engineering hire at Signal Sciences. Today, James will be bringing his perspective from the front lines on LLMs in the software development lifecycle. And lastly, but certainly not least, Brian Joe, one of my favorite people, product people, and people in general in the security industry, co-founder and chief product officer at Impart Security, former director of product management at Signal Sciences. And today, Brian will be giving us the perspective of what's going on with LLMs at application runtime. So how's everyone doing today?
Very good.
yeah,
Doing
great.
good.
Thanks,
Yeah, really excited to be here with the Dean of Detection. That's a good one.
That's new for me.
Our agenda for today, we'll be discussing what's going on with LLMs and application security today, where we may be headed over the next 6 to 12 months, and what the implications of generative AI and LLMs may be for AppSec teams, the AppSec engineer role, and on a holistic level, how LLMs and Gen AI may impact how we do security. So let's jump into the discussion. So we all know that how hot of a topic AI and LLMs have been over the past year. There's been no shortage of news and headlines coming out in the security space. At one point in mid 2023, I felt like the negative headlines would never stop. It was just a constant barrage of data breaches, sensitive training data being exposed. But it seems we've turned the corner and we're leaving the Wild West for LLMs in cybersecurity, most in part thanks to public-private industry collaboration with things like the OWASP Top 10 for LLMs being introduced, OpenAI's red teaming network being formed. A lot of security research have pivoted from the more secure traditional security things to now begin focusing on looking for vulnerabilities in open source AI models like Llama. There was a video from James Berthoty where he tests out a SaaS vendor solution and pits it against GPT-4 to perform some code reviews to see which performs best, basically a bake-off. And to my surprise, GPT-4 beats out the SaaS vendor, which is pretty mind-blowing. That said, I'm sitting with three experts who are deep in the trenches of LLMs and application security. So let's jump into what the state of the state is. Phillip, as a practitioner, what are you seeing with LLMs and AppSec today? Is it all hype? Has it improved your workflows at all? Or how much attention are you even paying to some of this stuff that's been going on?
Yeah, I mean, you just ran through just so much that was going on. Definitely keeping tabs on it. I think a lot of that is just kind of to be expected. We kind of have this new technology that interfaces with humans, so it's going to be a vector for exploitation and all that. I think it's just part of the the growing pains with this new technology. You know, overall, I think in a high level, what we're seeing is just a lot of investment and exploration. You know, folks are just running to this to take advantage of what it can provide. And then obviously from the offensive side of AppSec, you know, there's a lot of researchers out there to discover how to exploit it, which this is all good because we need, you know, this activity to identify and then those issues and then patch them to reduce the risk of this, you know, inevitable ubiquitous use of AI, right? So we definitely need a lot of that. From the defensive side, I think it's, at least for me, it's a lot of figuring out how it can be leveraged to provide like the most efficient and effective outcomes when it comes to securing applications. Yeah, we need to go through that process of understanding, you know, how to properly apply it to get the best outcome from it. But I feel like, you know, there's this big rush towards AI, which is good, and that needs to happen. But once you're there, I think it's going to be a bit of a process of crawling to determine where and how you apply it in a way that makes the most sense. And then we can start to walk with it and then eventually run with it. So, you know, in some, I think it's just right now, it's a lot of discovery is going on with LLMs in the AppSec space. And for me, I don't see AI as being the silver bullet to the overall large challenge, like secure SDLC yet, right? Like it's definitely not going to be there yet, but I see it being reasonably good at addressing, you know, smaller bespoke problems, kind of breaking down, you know, various problems you're trying to solve to bite size and then leveraging AI to help with that. The use case that came up first, which, you know, like any organization dealing with the threat of phishing, this seemed to be, you know, evident to me that this technology would be really good at kind of parsing and determining if an email is actually a phishing email, you know, based on a set of questions that you can prompt it with. So that was really the first use case that we've applied that in my role, and it's been reasonably good. It's one check of several other checks that we run against emails, so it definitely helps boost the confidence in how we score whether an email is phishing or not. Yeah.
So how do you determine, like, as a practitioner, like which AI components are like the things you want to leverage it for? Because I think like that's like you hit on a really good one, right? Like summarization and like trying to like sentiment analysis there, like great, right? But like you know, because I think sometimes the AI problem is like we try to fit an AI just like on anything, right? Like rub just whatever model we have against this problem we have, and it's like, oh, it didn't really work. But like, you know, how are you kind of like choosing and picking like the hot button issues that you're wanting to like target for AI LLM usage and adoption?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, it's more of a wait and see, because as I use it, you know, personally to help me with, you know, tasks that I'm trying to achieve, mostly around coding, right? Like I deal a lot with automation, so it becomes kind of a shortcut to get me to where I want to go in some cases. So, but I think overall for the AppSec space, it's a bit of a wait and see. We're kind of watching to see what vendors do, and how they're applying it. And I think we've seen some good starts in that space. And again, applying it to like bespoke problems. Like for example, you know, a vendor may have a certain proprietary language for a rule set, right? And it's, you know, kind of explain to me what this is doing, or the reverse, let me explain to you what I want, and then you write the rule. So I'm seeing things like that happen, which I think are good, and it's an enabler, right? So for AppSec practitioners, right? So it helps them become more efficient, more effective, and then they've got, of course, across the team, with knowledge sharing and being able to, you know, have multiple players work on the same technology. You know, that's very useful. So
Yeah.
So yeah, and for vendors, I mean, I guess vendors that are maybe trying to make claims of solving very large problems with AI, very skeptical of that, not rushing towards them. So it's right now it's just kind of like, well, let's experiment and let's see what we're able to discover through that experimentation.
100%. And I love the crawl, walk, run analogy as it relates to trusting the like Gen AI and LLMs to offload, or even as a staff augmentation play within security operations and application security, because when it comes to hallucination and overall model efficacy, we had a pretty rocky start. But how as things have continued to mature, some security folks are opening up a little bit more to leveraging these solutions. And when it comes to like vendors claiming and promising that they'll solve these big lofty problems with Gen AI, we've seen a lot of those with leading up into RSA, which is in about a week or two at the time of this recording. It's like, let's focus on the very small practical issues first, and how can we solve those? And with summarizers and explainers and some of those more simpler use cases that can be force multipliers, especially if you have like any junior team members, it can really go a long way. So great call out there, and great question on the what's the hot button? How do you decide what you want to solve with Gen AI and LLMs? Good question there, James. So we also have like a pretty cool dynamic on this panel where we have one practitioner and two vendors. James, I'll pop it over to you. How have you seen LLMs impact the overall software development lifecycle, and what you guys are doing over there at Dry Run Security?
Yeah. Thanks, Darwin. You kind of hit it right on the head when you mentioned that James Berthoty video earlier. I think a lot of people are surprised at like how good GPT-4 is against some of the traditional SaaS players out there. And to me, it's really interesting, because if let's say we take like how a human brain works and processes information, right? It's like part of it is like some pattern matching, and part it's like novel generation of ideas. Well, okay, LLMs are considerably like not so good at like the generating new ideas. It's like token guessing and like probability to try to put all that together, right? Okay, we got that. There's variation there where you see like the hallucinations you mentioned, but really good at pattern matching. And like context windows are exploding like in size, and so you can do some really amazing things there. And if you start thinking about people in security, what like any good security or any like good senior developer kind of worth their salt, like they're really good at pattern matching too. I can pull off a senior developer from one team and even move into like a different like language or stack, and they can generally do pretty well, especially if it's like maybe if it's like an MVC app, right? And they're like, oh cool, model view controller, got it, and I can find my way and figure it out. And within a couple of days, like adding real value. Well, like that pattern is something that an LLM can really figure out. And so like the old way of like just like using like really specific regex stuff to do things, or like writing and building all these rules and like tuning and stuff that we have to do, that we've been doing for the last 25 years in the SaaS world, like that's dying. Like that's not going to be a thing anymore. And that's what we're doing over at Dry Run Security. We're making that not a thing anymore, where you're not stuck doing all that. And because we realize like, LLM's good at things like summarization. Like, so we have like code summarization. Like if you're not seeing that coming in, like we do that. We can detect for like APPSEC problems. We were able to know like what, like fed a directory structure. We can figure out like what kind of app it is, what it's doing, what it's touching, all these things. And now other people are doing this too, right? You can vectorize and do a code graph and kind of figure out, or a call graph and figure out like where everything lives in your code. But I mean, darn, what's going to happen? And I see, everybody else in the line here too, right? It's like, what happens when context windows are just way bigger than they are now, which they've already grown a lot since we've already, in the last, 12 months, right? We've already seen that explode. Like, we can now like ask questions just as if you were, and I think like Philip's point about like guiding for those email sorting, it's like you can do that same thing for like how you can look at code bases, and you can ask questions as if you were a human code reviewer. And so, and which is what we've been working on. Like we have a code review inquiry methodology that we use for interacting with LLMs and code base. And yeah, so it's, I mean, we're having a ton of fun because we're able to move out of this regex, rule writing, maintaining, sorting false positives, dealing with all the noise and triaging all that stuff, to like more high fidelity understanding, like being able to really like have deeper knowledge of the system. And we're able to come in with that knowledge of the language of framework, have a lot more higher cardinality to the findings that we have and like what we present to the user. So it's pretty fun there. And I think that's going to really change the space, because like all the a lot of the investment in that wing is just gonna like there's a new way to do this, and people are going to discover it.
Yeah, I love your point about exploding context windows. I feel like it's a kind of like this arms race for people who know, right? Like it's a million tokens or whatever. But I guess what comes to mind is the problem of code analysis, and just the SDLC seems really well suited for what's like immediately on the horizon in terms of like context windows. Like if we're not already, you could conceivably put like an entire code base in a context window, depending, on how large the application is. And I'm sure like if we're not there yet, like we'll be there very soon, which I actually feel like unlocks quite a bit of opportunities for pattern matching and new types of detections that just aren't happening today. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, Brian, you're never going to go and buy something off the shelf that understands like how you do app authorization in your application. Just impossible. But you could feed that you could feed your app into that context window. Boom, it understands what you're doing, and then like then variation of that inside your code base and your code changes as they come in. So yeah, you're spot on there.
No, I was just gonna weigh in on the context windows from a runtime standpoint. I just pulled some stats the other day, but even though like the context windows are so large, when you think about what's actually happening at runtime, the raw tonnage of data that comes in our space, for example, like API requests per day, we're talking millions or tens of millions of requests per day. That's an order of magnitude or several orders of magnitude larger than what's in a code base or what's in a scan results or something. So people can take samples or events or summaries of what's happening at runtime, and then run LLMs, do pattern matching on top of that. But I think in terms of being able to shovel the full fire hose of data into a system, it feels like we're a ways away from that. And sort of this idea of taking like this huge amount of data and putting it into a model is going to be challenging. And I actually almost feel like the reverse is going to happen, where for some problem spaces, the amount of data you have is actually going to be so large, it might just be easier to move a model to where that data sits. That's not going to be true for like scan results or source code. But I think for operational runtime data, I think that's what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, that to me that makes sense, Brian. Like I think like anything where you can have like allowable window of latency and you have a fixed amount of size, like the kind of stuff that we're caring about at Darwin Security, I think like that's a thing. But your approach, like being in runtime, like that is gonna have it's a different way. And I think like that gets even to Philip's point of like how we're thinking about applying LLMs. It kind of depends on like the where we end up with like the problem that we're trying to tackle, right? And I think sometimes I get frustration from people like saying like, oh well, you can't do X, Y, Z or whatever with LLMs or something, or whatever. It's because they're trying to force it like to do something that it doesn't do. Or I mean, I've even seen like traditional SaaS vendors tell me that like what I'm proposing is like impossible and never going to happen. I'm like, okay, but I feel like there's some uncertainty, but I think a lot of that comes from usage of LLMs or AI in kind of not to say like the wrong way, but like their other experimentation failed, so they think, oh, it can't work in this other window or in this other avenue.
Right. And so LLMs in generative AI is very good at some things and not so good at other things. So when it comes to like pattern matching, as James highlighted, it excels there. But in terms of like arithmetic or other areas where it's not generating language, what it's naturally intended to do, reasoning based on all of the data that it's been trained upon to output in a response to the prompt that it's been given, then the overall performance and results that you can get from LLMs, it degrades because that's not what it was naturally intended to do. And so a lot of folks skepticism when it comes to applying LLMs to security use cases may come from not naturally understanding the intended use of Gen AI. So good highlight there. So I'll pop it over to you, Brian, in terms of what you're seeing on the front lines in runtime with LLMs.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're seeing is just LLMs and runtime. There's not enough scale or capacity in existing systems to handle that volume right now, because the raw amount of transactions per second in our use case or almost any other runtime context, it's too large to just shove into a model and expect to get output that you can trust and rely on. So I think what we're seeing right now in use cases around the edges, right? Usability, things like using LLMs to explain different policies and rules, using LLMs to generate documentation and make it easier to understand, using LLMs to do things like make easy to understand alerts. That's where we're seeing a lot of the activity in LLMs in the runtime space right now. So I think what's actually going to be important now is different technologies that can do pre-processing. So taking huge tonnage of runtime data and then summarizing that data accurately and labeling it into things like events or tags that an LLM can then consume and reason with and explain and summarize for users.
Exactly.
The models are getting smaller and faster and cheaper and lower cost. The future is going to be with kind of what it always boils down to is the data, right? What data do you have access to? What quality and speed can you actually process it through your pipeline and ensure its security and data integrity? And then the LLMs can be brought to the data. That's a lot of what, our secret sauce is, having really strong data pipelines and data processing so that we can, for now, make the data more accessible to what LLMs can actually do in terms of pattern matching. But over time, I think we see a future in which we can start to expose more and more of that data to LLMs or almost the reverse, attach the LLMs to that data to actually do things and fulfill tasks for security teams.
Yeah, and thanks for providing us a look into what's going on at Impart and kind of like the gravity of the problems that you're trying to solve with LLMs. I think that as these models become more lightweight and more sophisticated and better with efficacy, we'll see them become better for different use cases. And at runtime, would you say it's like game ready, production ready yet? And what are your overall thoughts on like what that timeline may look like?
I just don't see the industry being ready to turn the problem of runtime analysis and detection and response completely over to an LLM. There's scale challenges and there's trust challenges in terms of being able to explain why a decision was made. And also being in production is very different than being in the SDLC in the sense that there's extremely high stakes, right? If you make a mistake in production, you block, too many false positives, that can actually have a material effect on your business. There's not the same type of change control process in production that there is in the SDLC. Like there's no concept of a pull request in runtime, right? Like there's effectively, if you make a mistake with a blocking rule or a configuration, you can actually take down pretty large segments of your API or your application.
Brian, just to tag on to that, just made me think that, what people will be willing to trust or hand over to AI, right? There's the analysis of the data and summarize and then present a potential decision about the data, whether to block or rate limit or what have you. But I don't think we're at a comfortable place where we could say, well, I'm going to hand that decision making over to AI to actually enforce it, right? So
Yeah.
It can be an input to the decision, but we wouldn't want necessarily at this point let it act on its own decision making.
Yeah,
100%.
totally.
Yeah, and back to that crawl, walk, run analogy that you use, Philip. So looking ahead, 6 to 12 months out, where do we see us going with LLMs and AppSec? Can we partner like a code gen tool with dry run and quit our day jobs? Or as we just heard, right? Like at least at runtime, we're not ready for it. We're not there yet. And so obviously with the criticality of the type of work that we do in security, there will always have to be a human in the loop. But all jokes aside, like where are we? Where do you see us going over the next 6 to 12 months? James, I'll pop it over to you.
Yeah, I probably already gave my hand a little bit on that for like the context windows blowing up. I think like that is going to be huge for us. I know whoever's listening to this is going to be like, could they say the word context windows anymore? But I think that really does help make a difference to like let the model work, right? So like we have different foundational models we use inside of Edge and security, but then like we're we're doing kind of either the call graphs or like we have our own tuning, we have our question asking methodology. So there's like a lot of other pre-analysis stuff that we got to get ready for that as we're working through it. But I'm very excited about like people with the adoption of like the copilots of the world, right? And I see like more of that. And I believe that security tools like will kind of shift from where like you'll have your localized AI assistant, like as you're kind of like writing the code, you'll have a tool kind of like what we provide whenever like code is getting merged in to kind of like look at the broader dynamics of that across the entire team, and do kind of that pre-merge analysis. And then I think you'll still be running some of these kind of like endpoint or like DAST type tooling or DAST like things on a different cadence, but you're able to like move you're able to leverage like all this stuff to shrink the amount of time it takes for a developer to like get code into production that's like really like checked off from a lot of different security perspectives like really rapidly. And then you can still use your like off cycle or other like from the external inward to like kind of keep your certification that like will satisfy audit and compliance from those kind of components as well. But I think it's going to be a boon to developers. I know there's these like there's like the Devin thing that kind of I'm sure people have seen it. We can link to it and wherever it is, but it's like having the AI kind of like in your Slack and in your GitHub and writing the code and then like merging the code and opening the tickets and like doing all the stuff, right? And it's a little scripted, but it's definitely impressive to watch that, right? And even so, if it's kind of like boxed off to like certain tasks that it can do, it's exciting, right? You watch that and you're like, oh, like I can see where this can go, and you can see where like as developers are like assisted by this kind of technology, like even more so, it can be really useful. And so you'll have, I think code velocity is just going to continue to kick up. We're going to see less barrier to entry for people getting started in development. I mean, I'm bullish on all things development related. I'm not in the view that AI is going to like take all of our jobs. I think we're just going to find new places to put people as we guide the AI systems to work on the things we care about. But yeah, I'm excited. I think it's a good time to be alive and it's a good time to be a developer and to be in software. One of the reasons we started the company is because like we were hearing like APPSEC people say like, look, my team, like we got 1,000 pull requests that come across virtual desks a day. Which ones are risky? Which ones are not? Which ones do I care about? No one knows. No one has a clue. And so we want to be able to give like people a clue as to what that is. And I think that's to me the really exciting bit about all this.
One thing that I wanted to highlight is the Snyk AI code generated security report from 2023, and there was one key stat that stood out to me is that 56% of respondents encounter security issues in AI code suggestions. So I think at least right now, like a senior developer, security-minded developer may pump out more secure code than GitHub Copilot. But in 6 to 12 months, that may not be the case. So from your perspective, Phillip, what are your thoughts? Where do you see us going from a practitioner perspective with LLMs in APPSEC?
I think in practitioner world, experimentation continues. I think we're going to see APPSEC teams are going to discover ways to leverage AI in the way that we might expect. And I think dry run's probably a good example of that, right? Like analyzing PR requests and things like that. So that's kind of an area that we might expect this to be applied and APPSEC folks kind of gravitate towards. But I think there's going to be surprises, right? Like things we haven't thought of yet. Like as this experimentation process continues, I think we're going to be surprised by a few things, and we don't know what those are yet. So look forward, stay tuned, I guess. But and I think, you know, I guess it makes sense for in the vendor world, right? Like we kind of touched on it a little bit already, but building and training LLMs for specific domains, specific problem sets, right? Instead of just throwing your you know, code analysis problem at, you know, ChatGPT or OpenAI, right? It's a very generic, wide open, you know, LLM. You'd want to have something that's more bespoke to that particular space that you're applying it towards. And so that may mean AppSec practitioners become, you know, LLM builders and tuners, right? And applying that in their job. You know, for me in the near term, you know, I deal with, you know, detection and response automation, and part of that response automation is interacting and prompting humans to get information back about something we've detected. And that helps our team scale, right? So we're not like, you know, chasing down people to find out why this thing happened. And actually, I think OpenAI put out a open source security bots. So that's something, you know, we do already is prompting users via Slack, but I am interested in if, you know, applying AI underneath that is going to make that better, more effective, to be able to kind of consume the response back from the user and digest it more succinctly. So yeah, and I think it kind of touching on another area where I have an interest, and again, this goes to code analysis and being able to process code or code repos is, you know, we want to standardize on user agent strings that our code is making call out to, you know, our platform or what have you. And the reason why we want to do that is because we want to, from the detection side, we want to be able to easily identify things that are hitting our APIs. Is this friend or foe, right? So if it's using a standardized user agent string we know about, then we know it's likely a friendly, and we can either prevent actually blocking that traffic and letting it through versus, and then block the malicious traffic that we're dealing with. So having AI to be able to kind of comb our code base and identify the places where HTTP calls are being made, and then determine if they are setting a user agent string, and if they are they setting the proper user agent string? That's an area I'm interested in, because that's going to be, you know, use case that helps us all around from on the detection side.
Oh, I like that example because it is actually kind of spanning both the SDLC and I think runtime, in the sense that you're looking into the code to look for patterns and insights, and then bringing those into a place where it sort of closes the loop in terms of like the detection and response to find, you know, malicious users or attackers.
If it becomes a data point or a point of input to a decision, but not the decision maker, right? Or the actual mechanism that enforces the decision, that's where I'm hesitant, or would be hesitant and skeptical to just let it loose, right? But as input to inform a decision that's made by a human or other points of data that you know, kind of collaborate that decision, then yeah, that's where I think that makes sense.
Brian, I kind of go back to thinking about our signal sciences days sometimes, and I you know, I know, you know, Impart is kind of like, you know, really kind of next gen of that, and I see, like, I wonder as you kind of experiment with LLMs, because like I realize driver security, like Philip just mentioned, we have a benefit. Like there's still a human pushing the button. They'll be like, yep, merge that thing, right? Like looks good.
Yeah.
There's some approval. But you know, I was reminded of like our, you know, at Signal Sciences, like there's like penalties, there's blocking, there's other stuff like that. And there might be some like, I'm curious as y'all are experimenting with it, are you playing with like, you know, putting time delays on stuff, or some sort of like put people in kind of a virtualized like sandbox or penalty box or whatever, you know, and then how do they, you know, work their way out of it through either, you know, good behavior
Yeah.
versus behavior, you know. I mean, like there might be some like interim solutions instead of a hard block there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like how Philip framed it in the sense that, like, in terms of important decisions, which like a firewall block or a rate limit, that's an important decision, right? Security folks don't feel comfortable hand off the wheel there. They want to either make the decision themselves or define a policy that is structured enough to actually like feel confident in that decision so that they can explain, I blocked this request because of reasons XYZ. Like the use case we're seeing is basically bringing insights from the SDLC or even other runtime observations into that runtime context. So for example, one of the things that is pretty common in API security is some endpoints are more risky than others, right? Some endpoints have sensitive data, some endpoints are critical business logic, right? And those can change over time depending on what the developer is doing or what data is flowing through it. The way we approach that problem is we can have this idea of dynamic lists. One of the things that we can do is actually have that list be dynamically updated by other observations at runtime or even by an LLM to say like, hey, I've looked at this collection of endpoints or collection of user agents or, you know, any corresponding factor and updating that list in real time so that a blocking rule can actually take effect on that. So we are able to fuse like insights from what's actually happening, whether it's, you know, the insight comes from an LLM or code analysis or testing results, and actually access those and put those into runtime policies that are trusted by security teams.
And
so,
Brian, from your perspective at Runtimes, how do you see LLMs impacting the work you do over this next 6 to 12 months?
yeah, I think there's a progression. So I think right now LLMs aren't trusted enough to make blocking decisions. I think what we're going to see soon is LLMs being trusted enough to give factors or insights to blocking decisions, whether it's through lists or other tags that get assigned to predefined blocking policies. In the next 12 months, what we're going to see is the quality of those insights are going to increase. They're not just going to be simple things that are basically like automated versions of rule-based detections that humans think of today. I think there's actually going to be more LLM generated pattern recognition type of insights that can get attached to those types of policies. So for example, some of the experiments we've been doing is we'll feed LLM with a list of endpoints and we'll say, hey, look, based on the names of these endpoints and the data that's going through them, which of these do you think is risky? And so it'll recommend some number of those endpoints. And even though we don't feel super confident in that right now, because it's hard to explain and that's not something we're going to put into an active blocking policy, I do see in the next 6 to 12 months, the reasoning capability, the inference capability of these models is going to get better. We'll be able to better explain themselves. And I think we'll start to see some of that emerge in critical business decisions like blocking API requests.
Awesome. And now changing pace a little bit in terms of how LLMs and Gen AI is going to impact application security as a craft, as a practice, and ultimately how it will impact and change the application security engineer role. What are some of your thoughts there, Philip?
I'll give you 5 phases of how it's going to, I guess maybe this is a prediction. So phase 1, it's going to help teams scale, right? It's going to help them scale, help them increase efficiency and efficacy in their role in doing AppSec things, right? And then phase 2, you couple that with automation, it's gonna take on more of a role in the AppSec world, right? So they're gonna automate more, so it's gonna do more for the AppSec practitioner, and that of course frees them up to focus on other things and continue to experiment. Phase 3, I'll reference something that I heard from an economic commentator where they said AI plus robots equals infinite humans, but I'll translate that to the AppSec kind of context where it's AI plus automation equals infinite humans. So you think about the workforce, right? And I guess this leads into phase 4, where, you know, you commonly hear in security, we don't have enough people, right, to fill these roles. Well, that problem may start to dwindle away with AI and automation. And so, you know, it'll be interesting. Like I said earlier, it might be that, you know, an APPSEC practitioner's role is tuning an LLM. So that's phase 1 through 4. And so then phase 5, I call the Star Trek episode, which for the life of me, I can't find the exact episode, but I know I saw it. I know it's real. And in fact, AI failed at helping me find this episode. But what it's about is, you know, the Star Trek crew, they received a distress signal from a planet. They go to this planet, and this civilization is starting to die off, but they're extremely advanced. Like, technology runs everything they do, and it has done that for generations and generations, to the point where the current generation does not know how to repair the technology. So in other words, we're going to kind of eventually forget how to actually do AppSec because AI is doing it all for us. And then I don't know, we'll need to reboot, or we'll end up in a world of hurt. I don't know. So that, now I don't have a timeline with those phases, but those are my phases that on implications for AppSec.
Anytime there's a Star Trek reference in a prediction of the future, that's a good one. It's a good
It would
prediction.
have been better if I had the exact episode number, but I can't find it.
Yeah.
I think we should come up with some sort of diagram or timeline for Phillips' different phases and predictions. I think that would generate a lot of discussion in our space. At some point, we may get to where we're too far to turn back and things might get a little wonky. Brian, you mentioned that code gen is going to lead to a lot of noise, false positives, just a lot more for AppSec folks to deal with on a day-to-day. And so any other industry implications that you can think of from the rise of use of LLMs in AppSec?
Yeah, I think, you know, like with any major change in technology, whether, you know, like the cloud or mobile or the wheel, I think there's certain job responsibilities that sort of get disintermediated or disrupted, but then almost always there's a new class of job that, you know, emerges to kind of take on new problems that arise. I think in security, I think of the idea of like vulnerability management and like detection, how, you know, detection used to be fairly difficult, right? You'd have to come up with all these rules and run tests. And now we're at the point where detection is so easy and cheap that there's a whole industry of companies whose job it is to just help you figure out which findings are the ones that are the most important. So I think there's going to be a similar, you know, dynamic here with LLMs. I think LLMs are going to generate so much activity and just, I don't want to say distract. They're going to generate so much interesting things to think about that we're probably going to have to come up with new tools to help us figure out which of those things are the most relevant. And I just, for the reasons we talked about, I always see the list of things that you should be thinking about growing faster than the list of things that you should be doing right now. So I think that's going to be an interesting shift in, or it's more just like an acceleration of what we see in terms of things like management and prioritization and posture.
James, we'll end it off with you. What are your thoughts in how LLMs, the overall impact that it will have on security teams and the way that we do application security?
Darwin, I think I'm glad you saved me for last, because I just want to. I would echo really what the other folks said here. It's like, look. Let's just say it. I think that the posture management and all the vendors kind of in that space, that is a symptom of a problem, right? It's an intermediary step for where we need to go, right? And it's not really It's not really a value add step. It's like, it's just a fact of like, we had so much tool bloat and problems that we got to figure out a way to deal with all this, right? Yeah, I think LLMs have a pathway that could help make that potentially better. But then I think there's an alternate path too, where that they could make it worse. I don't know. We're gonna see. The future's gonna unfold. I don't have a Star Trek episode for that one, but you know, I think like that is the path. And I can't follow Philip all the way to phase 5 or whatever step that is, but I think that our industry has always had a problem with understaffing. And you have, for 100 developers, you got 1 security person, or 200 developers to 1, or whatever. It's a crazy outgun ratio in these industries. And so I think we're in some places, yeah, maybe AI, like people have to retool or reskill or something like that. And I think given our industry, we'll see some of that. But like, we're a chronically understaffed segment of software development and software delivery, or people in the SOC, or just like security in general is just kind of always facing that. And so AI really has a chance for us to like we're not going to go from you know, this level to like, okay, we can reduce our headcount, right? It's like no, like we can maybe keep up. Maybe we have a prayer to keep up with like the industry at large. So I don't know. I just want to. I think, you know, the right answers were already provided by Brian and Philip, and I'll just you know, add some. There's my color on it, but I think that is the way I believe it to be true as well. So.
Cool. So with that, I think we're all pretty excited about the potential that LLMs can have in application security in our day-to-day workflows. We were able to cover it from the practitioner and also the vendor side of things. We have a lot to think about, and we have our work cut out for us. Any closing thoughts from Brian, James? Any closing thoughts or words of wisdom for our audience?
I guess I would just say, just kind of offer 2 opposing thoughts. If you were to say, like, kind of in a broader sense, not just with technology or AppSec, you know, what are some of the fears with AI? My only fear with AI is that because of like the human condition, we're never going to fully realize the potential of AI and how it can promote and enhance human flourishing, which I think is going to be unfortunate. That's probably a whole nother discussion to dive into that. But the opposing thought there is kind of what we touched on already, but the future of AI is going to be a surprise. I think we're not seeing its end today, right? Like, we're just at the beginning. So where we end up, I think, will be a surprise. And it's going to only amplify humans, not usurp them. So I think it's a positive future.
Awesome. And I think, well, if there's nothing else to add there, James or Brian, we could end it off with that dose of optimism. Anything else to add there?
Can't think of anything better than that.
No, an optimistic Philip is like, that's what I want in my everyday. So this is perfect.
Hell yeah. So AI will not usurp humans. It will only elevate us and augment us and amplify us at the end of the day. So that's a good note to end on. And with that, thank you for joining us for Real Talk LLMs in Application Security with Brian Joe, James Wickett, and Phillip Maddux, and myself, your moderator, Darwin Salazar.
On the scene at Impart Security, we keep your APIs clean. Guarding real time, our tech is the top selection for your apps. We provide that robust protection, cutting edge safety. No need to fear. Import's in the house, your data secure here.